Randomized Determinism. This essay explores life, the universe, and everything. Chapter 1. The Save Scum Epiphany. I remember playing Fallout when I was a kid. One of my favorite things was sneaking behind NPCs and pickpocketing them. The only problem? My stats were low early on, so I failed a lot. But I quickly figured out a trick. The game let you reload after a failed attempt. So before every pickpocket, I'd quick save, give it a shot, and if I failed, I'd just reload and try again. Over and over until I got it right. It worked because the tests were truly random. The engine rolled a new number each time. Sure, it was cheating, but I had a blast. Years later, I was playing XCOM, Enemy Unknown, and tried to pull the same stunt. I missed a shot, quick loaded, and still missed. I reloaded again. Same result. Turns out Firaxis had pulled a clever move. When you start a new game, it generates a hidden file for each character, containing thousands of pre-rolled random numbers in sequence. Every action, like taking a shot, pulls the next number from that list. They built this system specifically to stop players from cheating fate. It's brilliant. Every outcome is technically random, unpredictable and unknown, but also completely deterministic. Reload the game and it pulls the same number again. A missed shot stays missed, no matter how many times you try to undo it. Chapter 2. The XCOM Realization. This is where it hit me. I've always felt that everything I do is in some sense deterministic, bound by the rule of cause and effect. And yet at the same time it all feels completely arbitrary and unknowable. There seems to be no real reason why the universe is the way it is. Everything that happens has to happen. Effects follow causes, no exceptions. But within that chain of cause and effect, everything still feels random, ungrounded. Like it could have easily been different. It reminded me of XCOM again. The universe, just like the game, feels both random and deterministic at once. What if reality actually works that way? What if the universe functions on the same principle? What if its initial conditions were randomly generated at the moment of the Big Bang? That would explain the arbitrariness, the strange sense that things had to be this way, and yet could have turned out completely differently. I keep trying to find a better way to describe this feeling, but I always come up short. There's no word I know that captures this in-between state, this space between randomness and determinism. And yet, that's exactly where I feel I am. Somewhere in the middle where neither concept fully captures the nature of reality, but both together seem to get it just right. On their own, they fall short, but combined, they start to make sense. Chapter 3. The Script Problem. Determinism always struck me as incomplete. If everything is the result of cause and effect, playing out like lines in a pre-written script, then one question keeps echoing in my mind. Why this script? Why this particular version of reality and not one of the infinite others that could have unfolded? Why was I born male with green eyes in this time and place? Why not as a woman 5 centuries ago, planting rice in a village in China, or as a Martian colonist 100 years from now? Why does the number pi take the value it does, stretching out into infinity with digits we didn't choose? Why carbon-based life and not silicon? Why evolution through primates and not a branch of aquatic reptiles? Why does gravity pull instead of push? Why do some people die young in car crashes while others live to 100 and win lottery tickets? Why are some born into war zones while others sip coffee on balconies with ocean views? Why am I who I am, with this brain, this past, this exact thread of thoughts, instead of being someone else entirely? If the universe is fully deterministic, then every atom, every event, every breath I take must have been set in motion by something before it. But that just pushes the mystery further back. What set the first domino in motion? And more importantly, why that domino and not another? There has to be some reason for the particular shape of this reality, for why this is the world we're living in, and not one of a trillion other versions that make just as much sense on paper. Chapter 4. Why Chaos Fails. Pure randomness on its own makes just as little sense. If everything were truly random, then there would be no universe, only chaos. No stars, no planets, no molecules, no meaning. Without cause and effect, nothing could persist. No pattern could hold. One moment wouldn't follow another in any coherent way, and without that continuity, nothing could ever take shape. Imagine particles blinking into existence and vanishing without reason, zipping in all directions with no rhyme or rhythm. Nothing would stick. No atoms bonding, no molecules forming, no cells emerging, just a storm of disconnected events, each with no memory of the last. A world like that couldn't support life, or complexity, or even time as we understand it. It would be like trying to write a novel where every letter is chosen by a coin flip. You wouldn't get a story, you'd get noise. The universe we observe clearly isn't that. It has structure, it has laws. There's consistency and progression. One state leads into the next, and that transition isn't arbitrary. It follows rules, paths, conditions. Something holds reality together, and that something isn't randomness. But that's exactly what makes the XCOM model so compelling. It bridges the gap. It takes the unpredictability of randomness and locks it into the repeatability of determinism. It gives us a system where outcomes feel arbitrary and unknowable in the moment, yet remain tethered to an underlying order. It's not pure chaos, and it's not a rigid script. It's something in between. Randomized determinism. Chapter 5. Randomized determinism. Modern physics hits a wall when it approaches singularities. Black holes, the Big Bang, the origin points where our models break down and stop making sense. These aren't just technical failures, they're cracks in the framework, revealing something deeper. To me, these breakdowns aren't dead ends. They're open doors. They hint at an explanation for why the universe feels both deeply structured and strangely arbitrary at the same time. I believe the Big Bang singularity is where the seed of everything was planted. The moment of true randomness. Like hitting new game in XCOM, the universe rolls a cosmic dice at time 0. It generates a random seed, a set of initial conditions from which everything else unfolds. From that point forward, determinism takes over. Every interaction, every event, every moment proceeds from those first conditions, bound by cause and effect. But crucially, that randomness only makes sense in a place where rules don't exist yet, where there's no time, no space, no physics to constrain the outcome. A singularity is the only kind of state where that's possible. It's the blank page before the story begins, the raw canvas before the brush touches down. And in that ungoverned moment, the universe chooses, or rather generates, a starting point, a unique configuration, a cosmic roll of the dice. From there, determinism writes the script. Not a pre-written one, but one that unfolds logically, step by step, from the randomness embedded at the origin. This fusion, randomness at the beginning, determinism ever after, is what I call randomized determinism. It's not just a clever game mechanic. It might be the architecture of reality itself. Chapter 6. Challenging quantum randomness. I believe that true randomness can only occur at the singularity, the very beginning of the universe, nowhere else. And yet, quantum mechanics seems to contradict this. In countless experiments, when conditions are repeated down to the finest detail, we still see different outcomes. A particle appears here one moment, and there the next, spins flip, unpredictably, paths diverge. This has led many to believe that quantum events are inherently random. But I challenge that notion. I don't think we've ever actually recreated the same initial conditions twice. Not really. The universe is saturated with fields, electric, magnetic, gravitational, all stretching across space, constantly fluctuating and interacting. Nothing exists in isolation. Particles are not compact objects with fixed edges. They're diffuse, field-like entities extending across the cosmos, exerting influence via the inverse square law. Even at the tiniest scale, everything is subtly connected to everything else. Every nanosecond, the arrangement of atoms in the universe shifts. In our labs, our instruments, the space around us. These minute fluctuations ripple outward, subtly altering outcomes in ways we can't track, let alone control. The idea that we can set up identical experiments assumes a level of precision that reality simply doesn't allow. So when one photon goes through the left slit and the next, just a nanosecond later, like chooses the right, it's not because God plays dice, it's because the entire state of the universe, every field, every particle, every configuration, has already shifted. The context has changed, not in a way we can measure, but in a way that matters. Let's imagine a thought experiment. Suppose we fire a photon at a pair of slits and observe it pass through the left one. Now ask, what would happen if we could rewind the entire universe, not just the lab, but every particle, every field, back to the exact configuration it had at the moment just before that photon was released? Then fire the photon again. What should we expect? Should the photon go through the same slit again? Or might it choose the other this time, as if by chance? And if we repeated this rewind and fire sequence 1,000,000 times, always restoring the universe to precisely the same state, would we get a 50-50 split, or the same result every time? My intuition, my scientific instinct, tells me this. If the conditions are truly identical, then the outcome must be identical too. Photons should always take the same path. To suggest otherwise would be to deny causality, to accept a universe that behaves differently, changing its mind for no reason at all. A universe in constant chaos. In my view, the randomness we observe in quantum experiments isn't proof of fundamental indeterminacy. It's a reflection of our inability to perfectly reset the initial conditions. We aren't seeing randomness in nature, and yes, we're seeing randomness in our control over nature. Chapter 7. The Cosmic Fingerprint. To understand what might be the clearest clue to the universe's origin, we have to start with the cosmic background radiation, often called the CMB, cosmic microwave background. It's the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, a kind of fossil light that has been traveling across space for nearly 14 billion years. Long before stars and galaxies formed, the universe was a hot, dense plasma, chaotic and opaque. But as it expanded and cooled, it reached a point about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, where light could finally move freely. That light, stretched by the expansion of space into microwave frequencies, is what we detect today as the CMB. This radiation was discovered by accident in 1965 by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson. They were working at Bell Labs trying to eliminate background noise from a radio antenna, but no matter what they did, they kept picking up a faint, persistent signal from all directions. Unbeknownst to them, they had stumbled upon the thermal echo of the universe's birth. Their discovery confirmed one of the major predictions of the Big Bang Theory and earned them the Nobel Prize. Now, when I think about potential evidence for a cosmic seed, the idea that the universe began from a unique, random starting point, the CMB is what comes to mind. The CMB is a relic from an unimaginably early time, and it's not perfectly smooth. If the universe had emerged completely uniform, matter scattered evenly in all directions without variation, the forces between particles would have canceled out, leaving everything in perfect balance. No motion, no clumping, no stars, galaxies, or life, just stillness. But that's not what we observe, and instead the CMB shows tiny fluctuations in temperature, minuscule differences in energy density across space, and those tiny imbalances were everything. They gave structure a foothold. Matter began to drift toward the denser regions, pulled by gravity, slowly clumping together to form galaxies, stars, planets, and eventually us. These ripples in the early universe were the first dominoes to fall. To me, when we look at the CMB, we're looking at the fingerprint of the cosmic seed, the trace of the universe's first and only random moment. The moment the seed was planted and everything else began to unfold deterministically, step by step, from that initial irregularity. Where determinism explains the how, randomness explains the why. Chapter 8. Stacked Reality. So has my life been randomly predetermined in the moment of the Big Bang? Yes and no. When I make dinner tonight and decide to eat fish, that choice isn't encoded in the cosmic seed. The seed doesn't contain a detailed script of future events. It only holds the initial conditions. The fact that I'm cooking fish comes from the moment before, and that moment from the one before that in a continuous chain of cause and effect. Each moment is like a stepping stone in a line of procedural generation. It emerges directly from the last. In that sense, every moment becomes a new seed for the next. The primordial seed doesn't contain instructions for the shape of mountains, the color of my eyes, or what I'll eat on a Tuesday evening. It's just a set of parameters. Like in Minecraft, where a single seed number, meaningless on its own, is interpreted by an algorithm to generate valleys, deserts, and caverns. We don't see the mountains in the seed. The seed and the algorithm work together, randomness and determinism in tandem, to give rise to form. We see the same principle in biology. Our genes don't literally show our height, gender, or skin tone. They're just code, a molecular seed. DNA is a higher-level seed, unfolding into life through protein folding, cell division, and developmental processes. It's not a blueprint in the traditional sense, and it's an algorithmic recipe for building a living system. And as we move up levels, more seeds appear. You can't derive a frog directly from Schrödinger's equation any more than you can predict a game of Tetris from the physics of silicon chips. Frogs exist on a different layer of reality, governed by their own rules. Evolution, ecosystems, ribosomes doing their microscopic protein jazz. Economic systems? Same thing. They operate with laws of supply and demand, marginal utility, and collective behavior, none of which resemble quantum mechanics or gravity, and yet they're built on the same substrate. The economy is a full-fledged parallel universe of rules. Here, the currency isn't energy, well, it's money, flowing like a psychic fluid shaped by herd instinct and incentive structures. And then there's culture, the metagame, social norms, memes, tribal values, gender roles. These aren't coded in our DNA, but they emerge from it. Seeds planted in the Paleolithic bloom into TikTok trends and legislative arguments. These aren't disconnected realms, they're fractal layers. TikTok dances run on brains, which run on neurons, which run on chemistry, which runs on physics. It's all one universe, but with stacked rulebooks. So no, my decision to eat fish tonight wasn't inscribed in the Big Bang. But it's still determined, emerging from the moment before, which itself was shaped by everything that came before it. That's not confinement, it's scaffolding. Layered determinism isn't a prison. It's the structure that makes emergence, complexity, and meaning possible. Chapter 9. Determinism isn't the enemy. I have to address something I know many people will immediately push back on. Determinism is often seen as something inherently bad. It feels wrong on a deep level, as if it strips away free will and traps us in a pre-written script. For many, free will is the core of their identity. Without it, they argue, what's the point? Free will is also the foundation of our society and its institutions. We believe we make choices independently, that we're fully accountable for our actions. Our legal systems, our politics, our personal relationships, all are built around that belief. So to challenge the idea of free will is, for most people, like declaring war on everything. Every layer of meaning, responsibility, and selfhood seems to come under threat. That's why when someone questions free will, they often meet immediate resistance, sometimes even hostility. How dare you tell me I don't make my own choices? Who are you to deny me my freedom? What? You think I'm just a puppet? I can easily imagine some people so convinced of their absolute freedom that they would react aggressively to anyone who even dares to question it. But here's the thing. I don't see determinism as something negative. In fact, I see the exact opposite. And I'll make a bold claim. I believe I see something that most people don't. Determinism doesn't take anything away. It gives everything. Literally, I mean it. Without determinism, there would be no laws of physics. Without those laws, matter and energy wouldn't know how to behave. Stars wouldn't form after the Big Bang. Supernovae wouldn't explode. Heavy elements wouldn't exist. Planets wouldn't coalesce. Life wouldn't emerge. And I wouldn't be here writing these words. Without molecules obeying strict physical laws, nothing could ever form. Not structures, not organisms, not thoughts. Everything and everyone is born in an entirely prescripted way. No one decided to come into existence. No one chose to be born. There was no freedom of choice in the act of creation, of anything. And yet, here we are, fighting for freedom as if it's air, terrified that if we lose it, we lose everything. But the truth is, determinism is what brought us here. It is not the enemy of life, it is its architect. Determinism is the life giver. The laws of physics came first, we came after. We're talking about free will after being born from necessity, from a lack of choice. We fight for the freedom of choice without realizing we didn't even choose to fight. To many, determinism sounds like external control, like some cosmic dictatorship, and I get that. Our history is filled with the scars of authoritarian regimes, so anything that sounds like imposed order or loss of freedom triggers our deepest alarms. But what I'm talking about has nothing to do with politics, power, or oppression. I'm talking about something deeper, the scaffolding of reality itself. Without strict rules, we wouldn't exist. Without determinism, there would be no structure, no emergence, no becoming. In this light, determinism isn't a problem. It's the solution. It doesn't restrict what's possible. It makes things possible. It provides the order through which randomness can become creation. It lays down the track that progress runs on. It doesn't suffocate freedom. It enables existence. There's nothing to fear here. If anything, the absence of determinism is what's terrifying. Remove it, and reality itself falls apart. Some might still say, but I don't like the idea of losing my freedom. It makes me uncomfortable. But here's the truth. You never had it. The illusion of free will was born from a limited level of consciousness, one that mistook awareness for autonomy. We felt the gears turn and assumed we were the ones turning them. Let me explain. Chapter 10. The Illusion of Free Will. In the process of evolutionary growth, consciousness passes through a phase of self-consciousness. At this stage, it briefly falls under the dominant influence of the body's survival mechanisms. It identifies with its biological form, and this creates the illusion of separation, ego, and personal control. But when consciousness reaches a certain level, this illusion begins to dissolve. The sense of separation fades. The idea of free will collapses. The individual ceases to exist as an independent entity and gives up the illusion of personal authorship. And nothing is lost. You can't lose what you never truly had. So I'm not in control? You are, but so is everything else. I don't have a choice? You do. But that choice isn't solely yours. You are not separate from reality. You are part of it. It's a two-way highway. You control everything, but everything also controls you. You influence the world, and the world influences you. You are constantly changing everything, and everything is constantly changing you. This dynamic is mutual, unavoidable, and inescapable. But you shouldn't want to escape it. This is where so much confusion and suffering come from, the attempt to flee reality. It's like a fish trying to get out of the water. The confusion disappears the moment you realize that you are the water, you are the reality. The illusion of free will partly comes from our senses telling us, I'm separate from everything around me. Let's try something. Do you grow your hair? Are you consciously putting effort into it? No, your hair grows without your attention. What about your nails? Your heartbeat? Do you need to remember to release insulin after every meal? Are you consciously managing your digestion? Do you have to tell your liver to filter blood? Of course not. If your will were required to control your body, it would shut down the second you fell asleep. Yet your body continues. Chemistry, cellular repair, hormone balance, all happening seamlessly without your involvement. You might say, okay, but I still control my body on a higher level. I can walk, talk, make decisions. That's still me, isn't it? Let's say you want to learn the piano. But what if you were born before the piano existed? Or before electricity? How could you become an electrician then? What if you were born in ancient Greece? Would you be a YouTuber? So it's not entirely up to you what you want to do. It never has been. What if you'd been one of the 50% of children who died in infancy during the medieval period? Would you still say your life is up to you? When you say you're in control today, it's only because you got extremely lucky, born into a human body, in a time and place with options. If you'd been born a jellyfish, you probably wouldn't have watched Avengers last night. If you were born into royalty, your choices would differ from being born into slavery. So no, your life isn't just up to you. It's up to everything. Every atom in the universe affects every other atom. There's no such thing as isolated control. No place in the universe houses a centralized sovereign will. You didn't choose to be born, you didn't will yourself into existence. So why would time after that be any different? The illusion of autonomy is useful as a survival tool, but stands in the way of progress. It's time to let it go. But I control my thoughts, my inner world. Really? Think about butterflies. Why did you think about butterflies? Because you read the word butterflies just now. If I hadn't written it, would that thought have appeared? So, whose thought was it? Where did it come from? Would you dream of flying to Tokyo if you were born a fisherman in ancient Rome? Would you fantasize about a movie that hasn't been made? Thoughts don't come from you. They come to you and through you. From everywhere. Literally, from everywhere. What you do, where you are, who you are, and what you think are shaped by everything, everywhere, all at once. Everything that has ever existed, exists now, or ever will exist. You are not an isolated spark. You are the cosmos in motion. Everything moves because everything else moves. The illusion of free will often arises because humans have more options than most other creatures. Our brains and bodies give us access to a wide possibility space. Can a pig go to the moon? No. But we can. But if possibilities equal freedom, does a fish have more free will than humans because it can breathe underwater? Do birds have more free will because they can fly? Do cats have more free will because they see in the dark? Humans are creative, sure. Dogs won't play a violin. But does someone who plays 2 instruments have more free will than someone who plays 1? Does someone who plays 5 have more than someone who plays none? Possibility isn't the same as freedom. All smokers have the possibility to quit. Most don't. But we're conscious, you say. Yes, and that doesn't free you from causality. It just reveals it. Consciousness isn't your escape hatch. It's your spotlight. The more conscious you are, the more clearly you see the chain and your place in it. And with that awareness comes a deeper responsibility. You see that everything you do or don't do sends ripples through reality. You're not freed from the chain of causality. You're freed from the illusion of autonomy. Chapter 11. Cosmological Evolution. Let's now step fully into speculation. Granted, everything I've written is speculative to some degree, but until now, I've stayed within the perimeter of our known universe and the rules that govern it. Now, I want to look beyond that boundary, or maybe before it. Current physics collapses at time equals 0. Our mathematical models give out when we try to describe the singularity at the beginning of the Big Bang. That moment, the so-called origin, is where equations break down, where space and time lose meaning. But just because we can't do the math doesn't mean there was nothing there. It might simply mean our tools aren't built for that kind of question. The fact that we can't compute what came before the singularity doesn't prove there was nothing. It only reveals the limits of our tools. It's like assuming nothing happened before 1 AD just because our calendar starts there. History didn't begin with our numbering system. Why should the universe? I imagine the cosmos not as a singular event, but as a process, one that repeats. A universe that expands, collapses, and then begins again. A bouncing universe. A cyclical rhythm. Big Bang, expansion, entropy, collapse, reformation. Not a straight line with a start and end, but a pulse, a breath. Why do I think this way? Because infinite regress, usually seen as a philosophical dead end, starts to make sense when applied to the universe itself. The traditional argument for a creator, God as the first cause, doesn't actually solve anything. It just shifts the question one level higher. Who created God? The usual answer is, God was never created. He simply was. But why should we grant that timeless status to God and not the universe itself? Why not let reality be the thing that's always been there? Never created, never beginning, never ending. To me, that's a more elegant solution. Simpler, cleaner. No external designer, no divine exception. Just the universe, endlessly creating itself, evolving through cycles, governed by internal logic. No gods, no cheat codes. Just a self-generating, self-organizing process. I have no hard evidence. I'm not pretending to. But I prefer simplicity over complexity. I prefer natural recursion over supernatural authority. I find comfort in the idea that the universe is its own source. A cosmic process with no outside master, no origin in time, no terminal point. Just reality unfolding. Modern cosmology has entertained similar possibilities. The cyclic model, the bouncing universe, conformal cyclic cosmology, proposed by Roger Penrose, even string theory's notion of brains colliding in higher dimensional space. None of these models are proven. but they all share something with ancient ideas that have been around for millennia. Chapter 13. Ancient Monks. Buddhist cosmology, especially in Mahayana and Tibetan traditions, speaks of an infinite cycle of universes. Countless have come before, countless will come after. No beginning, no final end, just the endless rhythm of arising and collapsing, like waves cresting and receding on an infinite ocean. That's not poetic metaphor, that's precise cosmological doctrine. When Buddhist texts say that time is timeless, they don't mean it's mystical or vague. They mean it's relational. Time isn't an absolute container. It doesn't exist independently. It arises from change, from the perception of difference, from the interplay of causes and conditions. No change, no time, no interdependence, no history. In this way, Buddhism anticipated what modern physics is only now beginning to unpack. That time may not be fundamental, that the arrow of time might emerge from entropy or consciousness or some yet undiscovered principle rooted in information theory. And so, when I say I believe there were countless universes before this one, I'm not claiming something new. I'm echoing Buddhist thought, ideas that have been around for over 2,000 years. In samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, even universes participate. They're born, mature, decay, and dissolve, only to rise again. Physics is catching up. The cyclic universe model, the bouncing cosmology, Penrose's conformal cycles, or M-theory's higher dimensional brain collisions, all hint at a cosmos without a singular origin. Each cycle becomes a bounce, a passing of the torch. And with each bounce, the universe is re-randomized. A new seed is planted. Entropy resets, matter recondenses, the vacuum decoheres, boom. A fresh install of reality, a new game begins. And just like in XCOM, the new seed determines the terrain, the characters, the odds. Galaxies, black holes, stars, the fabric of space-time itself, all are downstream effects of that one randomized cosmic number, fed into the laws of nature. But here's the trippy twist, and where Buddhism meets bold speculation. What if each universe learns? What if the system is not just recursive, but evolutionary? In Buddhism, all things arise through dependent origination. Everything exists in relation to everything else. Nothing stands alone. Even the universe is a product of causes and conditions. And those conditions may evolve. What if, like a self-training algorithm, the universe adapts cycle by cycle? What if each iteration is subtly better at producing structure, coherence, complexity, maybe even consciousness? A Darwinian multiverse. Not survival of the fittest organism, but survival of the most generative universes. It's speculative, yes, but it's not crazy. Evolution works in biology. Why not cosmology? What if the goal of reality isn't stasis, but improvement? Not perfection, but increasing potential. Each cycle could be a kind of karmic feedback loop, not in a moralistic sense, but in a systemic one. A pattern that leans toward coherence, toward the conditions that allow stars to form, chemistry to happen, life to emerge, and minds to ask questions. This isn't a theology. It's not about faith. It's not even metaphysics. It's just one more way of seeing a lens. So maybe the monks weren't guessing. Maybe they just saw farther than we gave them credit for. Final chapter. So what is the point? Here's an observation, one that leads at first glance to a paradox. If my idea of randomized determinism is correct, that the very act of discovering it was already embedded in the seed of the universe. The moment I was going to think this thought, predetermined. But the fact that this universe allows for that kind of insight to even exist, that was random. Like the rules were rolled, and now here I am, typing on a keyboard, 14 billion years in, having a philosophical revelation. But maybe this is exactly the point. Maybe the universe is designed, or rather destined, to create the conditions for self-discovery. Alan Watts nailed that vibe. The universe isn't just running, it's performing. It's playing hide and seek with itself. It hides its own structure behind shapes and forms, emotions and thoughts, then gives itself tools like consciousness, introspection, and awareness to try and peek behind the curtain. That's the paradox. We must become shaped in order to discover that we are, in essence, unshaped. Watts once said, "You are something that the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing." And maybe this isn't a glitch in the simulation. Maybe this is exactly what the simulation is for. If we, as conscious beings, are fragments of the universe trying to understand itself, then the goal isn't simply knowledge. It's reunification, reintegration. That quiet, shocking moment when the seeker realizes, there's no me discovering the universe. I am the universe discovering itself. That's not a metaphor, that's literally true if consciousness arises from the same matter and laws as everything else. You're not looking at the cosmos, you're a subroutine within it, turning inward. That feeling of being separate from the world, it's a trick, a useful one. Your brain isolates you for survival, but beneath that filter, you're not in the universe. You are the universe, just temporarily running through a nervous system, rendered through a skull. Consciousness in this context is the interface connecting the part back to the whole. It lets us ask the question and then slowly become the answer. Higher awareness doesn't free us from reality, it returns us to it more fully. Watts again, you didn't come into this world, you came out of it like a wave from the ocean. And maybe, just maybe, if the wave finally remembers what the ocean is, that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of something new.